My name is Sharon Doni, as you can see, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker in New York and Israel. I was born and raised in Israel, as my accent probably discloses, and moved to New Jersey over 12 years ago. I'm actually a neighbor of Lorna. It's a pleasure for me. I've been the clinical director at the Israeli Center for Cult Victims for the past 15 years. And I will be referring to the center just for brevity's sake as the center, instead of saying the whole description. In this talk, I'd like to share the centered holistic therapeutic approach to supporting individuals who have exited coercive group. After a brief overview of the center and its work, because I think it's important to understand the different services the center is providing in order to understand how we leverage that when we meet survivors of traumas. I wanted to present two cases. It will be too long, so I will present one example of intervention that we did across a group that we dismantled that specific group. And so I will present that case, illustrate our 360-degree model of intervention, highlighting the value of complex, multi-layered responses in the recovery process. Okay. So you can see all that. And just in short, I will say that from the very beginning of my career, I was drawn to the field of trauma. I made it a personal and professional mission to study about trauma, its manifestation, and how it can be treated profoundly and carefully. Fortunately, over the past few decades, both the research and the clinical practice related to trauma have grown tremendously, expanding our understanding and the tools available to us as therapists. My presentation is basically a clinical one, not theoretical one, so I just want to emphasize that. Okay. So the Israeli Center for Cult Victims is a nonprofit public benefit corporation established in 2006. It is the first and only organization dedicated to addressing the issue of cults and cult-like groups in Israel. The center operates in and across three interconnected domains, as you can see. Direct support for individuals and family affected by cult involvement, public education and awareness, and lastly, close collaboration with government bodies, legal authorities, and NGO. In 2013, the center was awarded the Israeli Parliament Speaker's Human Rights and Democracy Prize. We were nominated by the Israeli Police, the Ministry of Welfare, and private citizens who had received assistance from the center. And I would say that from the outset, one of the center's primary goals has been to raise public awareness. We believe that the best treatment for cult victims is preventing people from entering it in the first place. Over the years, many families have reached out to us during early recruitment phases because they were exposed to media coverage and to our public campaigns, which enable us to intervene before deep entrenchment occurred. The time that a person calls is crucial. If he calls when his son or his daughter are already in a cult for the past 5 years, there is like a huge difference. If he calls when they're like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months into the process, then we can offer and do other things. Because usually at that time he is not completely alienated. But when it's about 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, so it's very common to see people that are alienated from their own families. And then it's much harder and longer processes to rescue them. I can say that when the When the center started to operate, and that was heartbreaking to see, at the early years of the center, when the awareness was like the public awareness was very low, we got several phone calls from families who said, my son, my daughter, my sister disappeared on us 5 years ago. We didn't even know where they are. Like the family didn't have any idea where the family member was. And it took them years to find out that that family member joined the call. Today, we are often one of the first call family members make when they notice emotional distancing or abrupt cutoffs. The center first CEO was a journalist who went undercover into a cult. She built strong relationship with the media, connections that remain central to our mission of exposing coercive control organizations and promoting in-depth investigative reports. So this is one of the main things that we are always in front of our eyes. We want the public to be very aware. It's not enough to invest for 2 years and then to let go, because you have other generations that are growing up. And if they're not exposed to the knowledge of what's going on around them, they will join those groups. Additionally, the center collects testimonies in a therapeutic manner. It avoids contamination of potential police investigations. As a result, the center maintains a proprietary database with thousands of reports of cult-related harm. Individuals and public servants can contact us to find out whether a specific leader or group has previously been reported. Even if there is no record at the time, if similar testimony emerge, we reach out to inform the original victim that contacted us that they are not alone. The relief this brings, the acknowledgement that a harmful leader truly exists and that I'm not imagining it, and I'm not a weak person, and I'm not the one who doesn't have enough self-discipline to stick to my leader, is often a profound and transformative moment. So what else the center does? We cooperate with municipal and national branches of the Ministry of Welfare, including Domestic Violence Prevention Unit and Emergency Shelter. We collaborate with Social Security, coordinate with national and local police, including the Major Crimes Unit. We engage with the Ministry of Health, collaborate with sexual assault crisis centers. On the legal system, the center provides expert testimony in courts, submit experts' opinions for legal proceedings, and appear as a friend of the court when needed. In one notable case of the biggest polygamist cult in Israel, the center, together with several former wives, petitioned the Israeli Supreme Court of Justice to appeal the general's attorney acquittal on charges of holding individuals in conditions of slavery. We initiate and collaborate with rabbinical courts or ultra-Orthodox courts, and with the intention to eliminate harmful groups. We provide professional training for police officers, judges, social workers, law guardians, and others. We have educational programs for youth leadership groups, promotions of media exposure, and so on. These are all the things that I'm outlining right now. That's the center, broad areas of activity and cross-sector services. I would like now to focus on the work we do directly with individuals who have been harmed by cults, as well as their families. Most cases start with a call to our hotline. Our hotline volunteers function as a central hub. They provide initial and immediate support and information while documenting every interaction in detail. Okay, so a person calls to the hotline and someone answers. And if, for example, he said, I just left this and that group, if we know the group, the volunteer might say something like, we know the group. You know it's a harmful group. You can keep going. Tell me what's going on with you. Where are you right now? And then the people start talking. The volunteers usually document everything in details. They write it in a very informative emails that we're going through, and we are seeing the information. If we know the group, or we have the impression that it might be a cultic group, we even tend to be easier. If we even suspect it might be a cultish group, then we would have the decision of like to offer those people to come to the center, either physically if they can. If they can't, it will be online to meet with our professionals and to have 2 hours free of charge to share their story, to actually give their testimony in a very therapeutic manner. So we collect those testimonies, as I said, in a therapeutic manner, ensuring that the integrity of any potential police investigation is not compromised. We are very careful. We will never say, so did anyone beat you while you were in the group? We will never say something like that. And it has pros and cons, because sometimes people don't remember everything when they're flooded. So sometimes we would be in a situation where certain information, we won't get that information in that phase. But we are willing to do that for 2 reasons. One, because we want the person to feel comfortable to tell his story in his way without any pressure. And second, because we don't want with any words into someone's, when there is a possibility that sometimes in the future he would like to file, he or she would like to file a complaint in the police. The testimony also, in the initial testimony also helps us to assess the situation of the person that is in front of us. In cases like if someone will come and is completely psychotic, then it's not our mandate to take care of that person. And if he's already connected to the mental health services, then we will gently refer him back to his services or her services. But if that's not the case, we will try to help them to kind of initiate that connection. If the person is like a cult survivor and we feel that he is suitable to get therapy, then we would suggest for him to get 10 crisis intervention sessions that we provide. Parents may receive long-term support and consultation. The centers facilitate support group for survivors, runs dedicated group for parents, and when appropriate, we hope to connect between survivors from the same group or parents from the same group, and sometimes it could be a combination of parents and survivor. The center offers support in legal processes. We encourage survivor to consider filing complaints while carefully weighing key factors. Will the authority take the complaint seriously? Meaning, what we hear, is it enough to be considered as a felony, or we will send the person to the police and you will pour his heart, and then they will say, we have nothing to do with it. So it's a waste of time and a lot of emotional effort for nothing. Is there a legal obligation to report? And crucially, is the survivor emotionally capable of enduring the legal process? In all cases, we prioritize collaboration and consent with the people that are reaching out to us. The center also provides guidance and support during interactions with the media. I think if someone decides he wants to interview for an article, we don't just say, okay, go for that. We will have a meeting with one of the people of our team, maybe me, maybe someone else. We will check that the person is capable of going through the process, that he will not collapse while doing so. We will prepare him for the interview. We will meet with him before he's giving the interview, after he's giving the interview, to make sure that he's feeling balanced as much as possible. After presenting the services the center provides, I would like to describe its 360-degree approach to cult survivor. A 360-degree approach might seem trivial. However, very limited research was done to compare emotional psychological treatment, to comprehensive approaches that include legal, financial, educational, and occupational components. The research usually focuses on the difference between different types of therapy, right? Like they can say somatic therapy is more efficient than this, psychoanalytic therapy is more efficient than this, but there isn't enough research injects everything together. And the research that exists that does relate to the comprehensive, the whole holistic areas of a person's life is primarily focused on inpatient settings rather than ambulatory care. Nevertheless, within those patients that are hospitalized, we see improvements in various functional categories and hence a decrease in disability severity. There is growing professional consensus that these are directions worth pursuing, and current research trends are indeed moving towards more holistic and integrative approaches. At the center, through trial and error and continuous improvement, we have witnessed how this approach amplified rehabilitation and healing processes. Our foundational approach is we view every cult survivor who turns to us as a trauma survivor. That's our basic assumption. The expression of trauma-related harm can vary widely, from classic symptoms of PTSD to complex PTSD to other manifestations that may not be immediately labeled as trauma-related, such as anxiety or depression or OCD. Cult survivors who come to the center often carry a cluster of traumatic experiences: exploitation, abuse, enslavement. Emotional harm is always present, always. If you will show me even one cult survivor that didn't go through severe emotional harm, then I will really ask myself if he was in a cult. Okay. Financial harm is almost always present. Physical subjugation and or neglect and abandonment are extremely common. In some cases, there is also sexual abuse in varying degrees of severity. Almost all cults inflict spiritual harm, which, to our experience at the centers, receives far too little attention in therapy outside the walls of our center. There aren't enough therapists who knows how to address the spiritual harm, and that's extremely important in trying to help our clients to rehabilitate. In some cases, victim life stories clearly reveals the seeds that made it possible for the cult leader to activate the mechanism of manipulation and control when they fell into their hands like low-hanging fruit. Some victims were born and raised into a cult, meaning their entire developmental process was shaped under the unequal, coercive influence of the group. These individuals often suffer profound harm, especially when the cult isolates them from broader society. And we have several of these in Israel, and some of them left Israel, but very well known around the world, like Lev Tahor. They escaped from Israel to United States, then to Canada, then to Guatemala, and they were partially dismantled. And these days, the state of Israel is running like a huge legal battle to bring the kids back to Israel, to rescue the kids over there. And they were living in the forest, actually in the forest, in a compound, very closed group. And so cult life, it impacts many domains. Trauma is imprinted, social functioning is severely disrupted due to deep mistrust in others, and areas like work and education are often subject to aggressive restrictions. Many survivors therefore emerge with major functional gaps. Even those who manage to maintain a profession or some material resources often struggle to function and make a living when everything they believed in collapsed, and they find out that they were systematically deceived by someone who exploited their lives to serve their own distorted needs. Their spiritual or ideological worldview also shatters. If during the cult they felt they know where the light is, once they leave, they say there is no more light, no clear path, and in some cases, no path at all. In light of all this, the center position is that each survivor deserves and should receive responses that are as tailored and comprehensive as possible. Through our work in recent years, we've reached a point where we can clearly observe the difference that occurs when we intervene simultaneously across multiple life domains. So our 360-degree model is based on the following core principles. It would be stabilization and psychotherapy. At that stage of psychotherapy is different than this second one. Okay? So stabilization, we will focus on ensuring basic life needs that should be addressed, like housing, income, safety, etc. The initial psychotherapy goes hand in hand with the stabilization process, focuses on validation, supported interpretation of their experience in the cult, helping the individual tolerate what they're experiencing. They're coming out very flooded emotionally, sometimes with severe anxiety. It's not a time to start an unfolding traumas and go like deep into traumas. It's more the time to help them contain themselves and collect themselves and feel that they're able to cope with the new life that they're trying to achieve. This is done also with various techniques, like helping them to learn to ground themselves or to breathe, but we are very carefully with those because many times those people were harmed with the same technique while being in cults. So we have to help them to be friended with their body very, very carefully. Okay, we ask permission almost for every small thing we do with them. Some people would say, don't even try to breathe with me, like just saying it, and they feel like they're falling. So has to be, we need a lot of awareness while dealing with all those things. So the deeper psychotherapy, I will use that slide and another one, okay? Because the another one is from the case example number 1 that we will skip because it's too long. So beyond stabilization, you want to offer meaning making and later on, where possible, deeper processing, like unfolding traumas and integration. Addressing previous life experiences before the cult to people who didn't grow up in the cult, helping the client identify connections between the two. If someone is coming and she was raised in a house where there was a domestic violence that she was exposed to, and later on she found herself in a cult and in an abusive relationship, we want to help her see the pattern. Otherwise, she will get to the next available, similar, whatever it is that will harm her. Addressing spiritual violation and the possibility to rehabilitate spiritual connections unreliant on another person. I want to skip a little bit. Yeah, that's from the first example. It elaborates a little bit more on that phase of the psychotherapy. So you can read with me. I'll just make it short. And so I would say something about the deeper psychotherapy that includes deep acknowledgement of the cultic harm, validation of the experience, of the cultic experience, exploring the specific mechanism of abuse they were subjugated to, and helping them understand how this mechanism allowed for repeated violation, attending to the spiritual abuse and its psychological implications, while encouraging them to explore spiritual frameworks that are internally anchored and not dependent on others. Trauma-informed practices such as we will emphasize their inner authority. We will work within the window of tolerance to people who knows the term, and to people who are not familiar with the term, I highly recommend to get to know that one. Prioritizing emotional processing alongside actual narrative. We try as much as we can to help clients with friended, with somatic work, body awareness, mindfulness, guided imaginary, grounding, and focusing technique. These all helps to promote and actually to accelerate healing. A cult formed around the males who recruited young women, sometimes as young as 16 or 17 years old. Once they turned 18, they were moved into his compound. Over the years, we received numerous reports from concerned family members about daughters being cut off from their families, living in extreme poverty, and surrounding themselves entirely to the guru's demands. These women received no education and were limited to menial tasks such as cleaning or begging. Eventually, a young woman came forward and shared disturbing information. She had a strong sensation that the guru intended to sexually exploit her. Felt the moment coming and fled. Soon thereafter, another young woman contacted us. This woman, the second one, shared that she was part of the group and connected very much to the guru and still wanted to meet with us. I have to admit that we're ambivalent. When we are getting such calls, it's very complicated. We don't know if the person really is ambivalent or was he sent by the cult itself. Because usually they know that we are kind of after them. So this second lady met with the center's director and myself. She began by stating clearly, it's interesting, that was the first thing she almost said. Don't tell me he's sexually harming others because I won't believe you. We spent 2 hours with her. From the outset, it was clear she still deeply identifies with the leader and the group. The conversation was warm but tense. We shared the information we had in an honest and sensitive manner. We expressed our concerns, but mostly listened to her story, her journey, what drew her to the group, and what she admired about the group. As the meeting ended, she said she had a lot to think about and would stay in touch, which she did. Over time, she began to distance herself from the group. She continued to update us and eventually began referring other survivors to the group to our center. We began collecting testimonies and realized there was sufficient legal basis to consider filing police complaints. The women involved expressed interest in doing so. Because this was a highly complex case and did not involve unequivocally persecutable crimes, the center director first reached out to the National Investigative Unit of the police. She inquired about the possibility of opening an investigation, and the unit decided to proceed following review. The women were summoned for questioning. We significantly escalated their emotional distress. In response, we had too many of them. We couldn't just meet with them individually. In response, we initiated an ad hoc therapeutic support group. We opened the group within 2 weeks. I think something like that, composed of survivors from this and other destructive groups. The group was led by the center clinical social worker with whom I meet weekly for supervision and joint reflection. Meanwhile, the police investigation halted, and we were notified they would soon terminate the investigation completely. They told the center director that there wasn't sufficient evidence to proceed further. She probed further and discovered that several key lines of inquiry had not been investigated. She suggested certain key points and areas of investigation for the investigators to pursue. The police agreed and re-engaged with the case in full. From that point on, the center and the police began the close collaborative relationship. One way this manifested was the investigator would contact us anytime when they noticed signs of severe distress among the women, and then we would provide immediate emotional support that day. They would call, they would say, she just left, he doesn't look well, please reach out. Within the support group, participants began to open up about the intense fear they carried, the fear of the guru, of the ritual, and curses he imposed, and of the possibility that they were bringing doom on themselves by speaking out. The presence of women from other cults was incredibly helpful. It allowed them to recognize common patterns and understand that they were facing that what they were facing wasn't about faith, but about coercive control. In parallel, the idea of media exposure came up. It was deemed necessary as many women were still inside the cult, and public exposure could help protect others and deter further harm. The women agreed under specific conditions negotiated between the center and the journalist. This is why usually we prefer it if we are mediating between the victims and the journalist. If we are not there, what we see that many times the journalist convince the victims to be fully exposed when they're not ready for the consequences. A few years ago, we had someone that was going through such a process, and the journalist contacted us after she exposed her, and that woman was on the verge of committing suicide. Mm-hmm. It's very dangerous. They don't really bother to assess who's capable of what. So conditions where no names or faces would be shown. The report would only air after the leader's arrest, so as not to interfere with the police investigation. The center would support the women before, during, and after the media process, constant support all throughout. As always, the journalist would retain editorial independence, but the center would provide leads and background information. And lastly, the center would review the article before publication and request removal of inaccuracies, and information that may identify the women or put them at risk. To make a long story short, the leader was arrested. While he was in custody, the women began trying to rebuild their lives. 3 of them were severely distressed. One was referred to a shelter, the only available settings equipped to meet with her complex needs. The other 2 needed ongoing therapy and requested to be seen by our clinical social worker that they met through the group. The center submitted a request to the Ministry of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund, which that year specifically allocated part of its resources to victims held in conditions of enslavement. Funding was granted, and those two women began receiving a year of therapy. Later, the leader was released into a house arrest. This was emotionally straining for the women. However, what completely devastated them was learning that he had repeatedly violated the terms of his detention. He just left the house, he went to the market, he did everything he wanted to. Our reports to the police were dismissed. They said they could not act without proof. The center director ensured he was photographed, breaking the conditions, and he was arrested again. Several years passed. Several years passed before his trial began. The women were engaged in rebuilding their lives and were ambivalent about taking his day. The center's director facilitated intensive consultations between the women and the prosecution. The women were leaning towards a clean deal. They were exhausted and wished to move on with their life. The proposed agreement involved no additional jail time, but would include a formal conviction for holding people in conditions of enslavement. This morning I was reading a lecture of two women. What's the name of the cult? Anyone was there left and someone else. They were punitive state filed a lawsuit, right? And she was talking about it with Canada. They weren't compensating enough people, right? So that's the path that we need to pave for victims. So the proposal involved no additional jail time, would include the formal convictions for holding people in conditions of enslavement. This was highly significant as it would set a precedent for conviction for conditions of enslavement in the absence of sexual or physical crime. Rather, there had only been a few isolated physical incidents. The primary harm was psychological. Technically, any of the women could have left at any time. Her submission was not physical, it was psychological. After much deliberation, and with a sense of purpose, the women chose to proceed with the plea deal. They understood that their case would establish precedent, formal recognition of cultic abuse and psychological enslavement within the Israeli legal system and perhaps beyond. Some continued receiving individualized support from the center. More recently, several of them contacted us, expressing a shared struggle. They have difficulty forming intimate relationship. None of them have an intimate relationship. They asked whether we could form a therapeutic or focus on this theme. We're currently in the process of developing such a group.